A headliner in Tuscaloosa, plus some games with early season conference implications, some for surprise teams. It is time to pick winners, or attempt to. This is the College Game Day podcast for Friday, September 27th. Rece Davis and Steve Coughlin, the legendary Stanford Steve here. Pete Thamel, as he often is on assignment or doesn't want to match wits against us, Steve. Which would you bet on?
I'm going to take the high road on that one and know that the Mr. Thamel's working. He's working on something.
He is always working. He spent a great deal of time this week working on the bizarre situation at UNLV involving Matthew Sluka, their quarterback. Who would have thought that early in the season that UNLV's quarterback would have gotten this type of attention, not only because of what appears to be basically a contract dispute between the two. And when we had Barry Odom, the head coach of the Rebels, on last week, one of the early questions I asked him is, why can't people tackle Matthew Sluka? The Holy Cross transfer, he basically won the Kansas game because Kansas would get free shots at him and they couldn't bring him to the ground. He played a great game. Anyway, bizarre situation there that, we'll see how it all sorts out as time goes on. That is not the headliner. Before we start making picks, Steve, Alabama, Georgia, on Wednesday on the podcast, we went over the stakes, the immense stakes between the two that they've played for in recent years, the Alabama problem that Georgia has had. Mm-hmm. But as you get into the X's and O's of this, people always look for advantage, disadvantage when familiarity is gone. Alabama players have familiarity with how Georgia plays because that scheme is not appreciably different than it's been the last few meetings. Georgia players are now seeing something different. I don't know that there's an advantage, disadvantage to it. To me, it just sort of adds a new twist. It breathes some a new feel to it, a little bit of uncertainty, because in the past when they played, it's been more about, will there be turnovers? Yeah. Who will pop the big play? Who will have the little wrinkle that you haven't shown them before? Now there's this whole idea of how will they adapt to different schemes that Alabama is going to present, and whether Alabama's defense will be as effective as the previous one was, particularly at keeping Georgia from running.
Yeah, on top of that, Rece, you have what the tape was the last two times these teams took the field, right? Georgia looked as beatable as they have during this incredible run they're on. With the 2 losses in 51 games, and those 2 are to Alabama.
Both to Alabama.
Yeah. And then Alabama finally gets the offensive line back that they had hoped for going into Western Kentucky week 1 against Wisconsin, and looked as good as they have under Coach DeBoer in this new era. So that, what do they say? You're never as bad as you look your last game, or you're never as good as you look. We have both teams on the different ends of the spectrum. So I would believe Coach Smart would have the attention of his team. When you look at Georgia, I think what sticks out to me is the idea of Carson Beck under duress against Kentucky, not having the security blankets that he relied on so much last year. You go back to that game in Auburn, on the ropes. Really showed out to me. Who was he throwing the ball to? Ladd McConkey, Brock Bowers. No, those guys are not gone there. Plenty was made of the tight end room at Georgia. Production is not there. To me, this is about Carson Beck taking the governor off and making those throws when he needs to against a Bama secondary that everybody talked about the youth, but they haven't been tested either. They played some not 60-minute games. South Florida was there, and then the fourth quarter happened. Western Kentucky, there were some throws open, bad interceptions. Wisconsin just couldn't do it. And then you stack on that Alabama playing with a monster lead against Wisconsin. It was just out of sorts, exactly what Alabama wanted to go into playing their first big game on the road. So on the other side with Georgia, it's can they take advantage of that inexperience in the back end? But Alabama's front has been, on the defensive side, has been really, really impressive. Everybody talked about where was the edge rushers going to come from. I'm not sure about Rece. His health, I mean, he's been the guy that stuck out to me. The biggest side change was Deontay Lawson changing from 32 to 0. The first game I'm like, where's 32? One of my favorite players in the country. Oh, there he is in the middle and 0. So it's a chess match. I do believe this is a higher scoring game than expected, with the total being in the 40s, the explosiveness Milroe does, the success that I don't want to say Alabama surprised Georgia with, but the add-on to their offense where it was the multiple design runs of Jalen Milroe that really was the factor in keeping Georgia's offense off the field in that critical SEC championship. So all that combined, and the idea of this game being at home and Georgia not having success at home, I think there's a lot of more pressure on Georgia. And I like that for Alabama when you come into this game, knowing what's at stake. Plenty of football ahead. I'm sure we'll get into, obviously we could lose a game now with the playoff, but when you start looking at these two teams' schedules, you're going to have to get some wins. Everybody talks about the tough games and the places you have to go play, especially with Georgia, having to go play this game, go play in Austin, Alabama, having to go to play in Knoxville. So this is a monster one because you want to get that first data point right where it's like, hey, remember when we did this? No one else in the country has gone this, because that's why I'm going back and forth now. Who has that best win in the country? Where I saw Tennessee in person last week, darn impressive. I don't know what's going to happen to Oklahoma. And then you go back to Texas, where we were there, and how impressive they were. And you look at what Michigan did it still sounds crazy that SC Michigan game is a conference game, but that win took jumped a tier, which I don't think we expected when we walked out of Ann Arbor after Texas dismantled Michigan. So there's a lot, and wins are going to, it's not going to be close losses what you're based on. It's going to be wins. So that's why this game is so big to me.
Well, I said Wednesday that the best data point on anybody's resume can't be a close loss. That can be a mitigating factor, but that can't be your number one bullet point. You brought up something that I wholeheartedly agree with. The pressure is on Georgia.
Yeah.
Because new coach, new system, preseason number one, number two now. The Alabama, gargantuan albatross that they've had around their neck that is Alabama, from costing them all of the championships over the last few years. Even though I know they still won 2 national championships, they only have 2 SEC championships, and that is because of Alabama in this Kirby Smart run. There is pressure on Georgia to come through here. What Alabama did really well in that SEC championship game defensively was they got Beck off of his spot from time to time. And guys are allowed to improve. If they're able to do that again, is he better in terms of being more accurate when he gets off the spot? Because we know he is lethal if you don't get him off the spot. They've got to find guys to make big plays. I brought up Wednesday, Steve. When we do X Factor on Game Day Saturday, I'm hoping no one else takes Arian Smith, because that's who I'm taking. Because in every big game, he doesn't have the quantity, but in virtually every big game Georgia's had over the last 2+ seasons, he's come up with a 50+ yard play. I think it was 76 against Ohio State.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a bunch of catches, but always has big ones. Can they get dealt lucky? Jurasik involved from a tight end standpoint a little bit more. Frazier, Etienne, do they make some big plays? Those are all big factors, but the mental hurdle for Georgia, there's pressure there. I think they'll come out, spitting fire, but so will Alabama. And I also think that this is the game. He doesn't have to win it for this to happen. This is the game where Kalen DeBoer officially becomes the head coach at Alabama, because he's signed the contract, he's run the practices, he's redesigned the office, he's won some games, he's won a home game, he's won a road game. He becomes the head coach at Alabama Saturday night.
Yep.
Because grand stage, big team they've played against, there's going to be overreaction among the Alabama faithful. Either way, if they win, it's going to be, we're fine. We haven't lost a step. Here we go. Now, it's a fight song goes, they taught the Bulldogs to behave again.
Yeah.
If they lose, it's going to be, oh my gosh, Nick Saban's gone. We lost the game. Saban would have won the game. And neither of those reactions completely rational.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it is to be the Alabama coach or the Ohio State coach of the Michigan. It's not just Alabama. He becomes a coach Saturday night officially. Officially.
Yeah. And Rece, you've been there more than anybody probably I know. But you know what I'm talking about when it's this kind of game in that stadium and you walk through the tunnel. This isn't South Florida, Western Kentucky. No offense to those teams. No. As soon as you walk through the tunnel, and
they can take offense because it's not. They can take offense if they want to because it's not.
But you know what it is. I mean, I go back to game of the century and all that. You walk on the field, you could feel the fan base, and that's the thing that people don't understand and just say, "Oh, Bryant-Denny, now it's Saban Field. It's different, but they always have the best players." Well, I don't want to hear that. When you're there, you feel the level of intensity as soon as you walk in the stadium for especially those night games. 3:30 games, sure. The crowd knows, hey, we got to step this up before. But as soon as Coach DeBoer comes out, he's going to know, all right, he's going to look around and say, I guarantee to himself, okay, this is different. This is different, and we're ready to go. So the coming to the moment of, you're the head coach, that's when it's going to hit him. And I cannot wait. Cannot wait.
And it bears repeating that it's not as if this is Kalen DeBoer's first rodeo in big games. I mean, the guy coached in the national championship game last year, and he's 12-2 against ranked opponents. So, with one of the losses, the loss to Michigan in the national championship game last year when he was at Washington, snapped a 12-game winning streak. Steve, let's make some picks. What do you say? Alabama, Georgia, certainly.
By the way, Dylan Bell, X Factor, if you want mine.
Dylan Bell's a good one, man. 86 is a baller. Also on College Game Day Saturday morning, we are scheduled to be joined by the legendary Lane Kiffin. I hope you had a chance to watch his get ready video before the Georgia Southern game that he made with his daughter. Absolutely hysterical. That guy's a social media genius, by the way. His demeanor is so funny. Anyway, he will, I'm sure, regale us with tales of morning yoga and whatever else might be going on before they take on Kentucky. Ole Miss favored in this game by 17.5. Now, the Rebels have eviscerated everybody in their wake, but they haven't seen a defense close to this. Steve, what do you say? Ole Miss or Kentucky?
Really excited for this matchup for that point, Rece. I do believe Ole Miss, Lane, going back to Lane, done a great job in piecing together guys from the portal into this roster. I've talked about it for weeks now. What you've seen from the defensive line is the best I've seen there since maybe, Hugh Freeze's Kimdichie teams and what they had there as far as when you talk about overall talent. What I'm really interested in seeing is how this Ole Miss offensive line handles a backyard brawler team coming in Kentucky that is not going to be afraid to throw punches. And what I mean is they're not going to be afraid to punch you in the face on the defensive line. They're going to bring exotic pressures. They're going to play flat out their butts off as a defensive team. You saw that against Georgia. They almost won the game with pure defense. And that's what Ole Miss is going to have. They got to line up for 60. They haven't had to play a 60-minute game. This is going to be 60 minutes. So I'm excited to see this matchup. Jackson Dart was my Heisman Trophy pick before the season. The numbers are there. But I believe Ole Miss wins, but it's closer than 17.5 for sure.
Ole Miss leads the nation 671 yards per game of offense. Jackson Dart, who you mentioned, leads the nation total offense and passing, both of those categories, by nearly 30 yards per game. He's completing just under 80%. But their three FBS opponents, Middle Tennessee, Wake Forest, Georgia Southern, 3 of the 6 worst defenses in the country. Now you're going to say, well, you play Ole Miss this early in the season, that's going to skew your stats. And that's a fair point because it's true. But for one of those opponents, the Ole Miss game wasn't even their worst performance of the young season in terms of yardage allowed. And for another FBS opponent, Ole Miss wasn't the only team to hit them for 600-plus yards. So Lane is absolutely right in saying what he said this week, that their non-conference schedule has not prepared them for SEC play. No. What he hopes has prepared them is practice and fall camp. I'm going to say it did. I saw what South Carolina's defensive ends did to Kentucky's offense and wrecked them. I think Ole Miss not only wins, I think Ole Miss wins easily. And I think by the end of the game, they cover the number. So I'm going with Ole Miss, and I think it's a solid victory that really puts an emphatic stamp on this is an Ole Miss team that can win the SEC. And I think if they keep developing the way I think they will, they are a national championship contender too. So we'll see. They need to do it. There are plenty, we joke around ESPN quarters, teams that have historically struggled in big moments, of which I wouldn't call this a huge, huge moment yet. But teams that haven't won championships will say, that's why your insert team name here. This Ole Miss team has a chance to erase the thinking of that's why you're Ole Miss and be a different kind of Ole Miss. And I think it starts with an emphatic home victory against Kentucky that will hopefully lead to more goodness from Lane Kiffin on social media. Saturday afternoon in the Bounce House, where UCF has been remarkable over the last 7 years. The Knights are a 2-touchdown, a little more favorite over Colorado, coming off that thrilling overtime win, snatching victory from the jaws of defeat and beating Baylor in Boulder on Saturday night. Rush of confidence. I said earlier this week on the podcast, Travis Hunter is the best player in college football. I don't see what would change that in terms of Heisman Trophy voting, but that's a long way down the road. But UCF can really run the ball. They don't defend the pass so well, at least not just yet. What do you think happens in the Bounce House Saturday afternoon?
Well, first off, going back to UCF, it's been another year, and boy, do they fit right in the Big 12. That TCU comeback win was the most Big 12 game there was this season. But now you come off a week off. Colorado, how do they come back after that huge comeback win against Baylor? Plenty of offense in this game. You touched on the names that'll be involved. Gus has always been good with wrinkles against teams. I think especially out of a bye week, that's a scary thing for Colorado. Talking to people that have played and coached against Colorado, they're not the best defense. They're certainly improved from what they have, and they have legit talent on that side of the ball. They just don't have the amass of other teams that are at the top of the rankings. So there's plenty of offense. It's a lot of pressure here on UCF. You get all these lights that come with Boulder coming to your town. They've had it circled, in the off season, being down there in the off season. So this is a really exciting game. I do believe Colorado has enough offense to hang around in this game. So I would take Colorado plus the 14.5. I'll say UCF wins the game between, say, 7 and 10.
I want so badly to pick the outright upset right here. But the one thing that scares me, Steve, you're right. Colorado is improved defensively. I wonder if UCF, with a lot of quarterback run, with KJ Jefferson, and with a lot of creativity in the run game, which Gus Malzahn is known for, and just the ability to overpower them, will make scoring too easy and controlling the ball a little too easy for UCF, because we saw, especially quarterback run, we saw some good moments from Baylor on Saturday night. I think as a 2-touchdown favorite, UCF is on massive upset alert because of what Shedeur Sanders and his receivers can do and how quickly they can score, and how Shedeur gets up no matter how many times you sack him. What Baylor get him the other night, 8 times or something like that. I imagine there will be enough pressures and disruptions and affecting the quarterback and sacks to let UCF sneak out of there. This also is probably going to be a little bit more of a wild environment than one might anticipate, because that's a good environment anyway.
Correct.
And you bring Deion back to his home state and Colorado and everything that goes with that. It'll ramp up some intensity, and UCF also has to handle that. Colorado will be prepared for it. They've seen it everywhere they go, pretty much. UCF will have to handle that. I want to pick the upset, can't quite do it because of fundamental belief I have is run, stop the run. That's old school, I know, but if UCF can run, So I'm going to go with UCF, but I think it'll be close. And there is no way I would lay that number against those guys.
The time you and I spend in grinding on the old super dog, I feel like multiple guys on the desk are already going to have this when we get to our meeting Friday. We'll just put it there.
So do I. And you, by the way, thank you, because you are a good of the show guy. We're competitive. We want to be good. We want to win. But we are good of the show. We go outside the games that are on the schedule to be picked, for the most part. And this is on the list of games that are picked. So for me personally, at Superdog, this is off the board. Because it's in the picks. I want to give love to another game, somewhere down the line.
Yeah.
So, but I agree with you. I think we'll see at least one Colorado from. I
wonder if it fits into the old algorithm from Mr. Howard.
Yeah, Desmond's been. Yeah, Desmond. He got his 5 spot again. He's checked down king. He's the
guy that sits down at the poker table. He just wants chip in a chair. That's all he wants. Yeah. Chip in a chair, give him a chance.
In South Bend, Saturday afternoon, being played at the same time as the Colorado UCF game, Louisville and Notre Dame. Louisville used some big plays and special teams play to escape Georgia Tech, who gave them a fight. Good Georgia Tech team, in my judgment. Louisville is, this is a game where they can make a statement, because Georgia Tech, good team, Notre Dame winning in that environment, even if the Irish are passing challenged. Cardinals flat ran over them last year, forced 5 turnovers, pulled away late in the game. How do you see this one? Louisville right now is a touchdown underdog, a 6-point underdog to Notre Dame.
Yeah, there's a lot to like in this game. I'm really fired up for this matchup because I'm not when you look at the resumes and what both teams have gone through so far, I believe this is Louisville's 4th game. And you look at Notre Dame, we were there week 1 in College Station. They've been decimated by injuries. They have the loss to Northern Illinois. This was, before the season, this was the game I had as Notre Dame's most likable game to lose at home. But I've been not astounded, but even more impressed with Notre Dame's secondary. I think they're the best. I believe they're the best secondary in the country, and Coach Brom's gonna test that. When you look at the matchup, what can Notre Dame do? They've come back. They've got Riley Leonard with the supposed injuries. He's run the ball like crazy the last couple of games. They've gotten their feet offensively. Those youngsters have gotten more time and experience, have gained improvement, and Coach Freeman's talked about that this week. Feels like too many points to me, though. Louisville is a capable team. It's gone up, which is, I don't know if Louisville's fully healthy. We'll have to get maybe Mr. Thamel on that one. But Louisville has the goods to hang around in this game. I'll say Notre Dame wins by a field goal.
Louisville, it has a little bit of that, what Nick Saban has called big little, right, on offense. They've had explosive plays, and then they've had negative plays. I think about 2/3 of their yards against Georgia Tech on Saturday came on half dozen plays. I got to tell you, Steve, I'm very concerned about the Notre Dame passing game. I mean, Riley Leonard is a terrific athlete, and that was always an area, even at Duke, that Riley needed improvement, and certainly has time to improve there. He's only thrown 1 touchdown pass, a couple of interceptions in the game. This is a must-win for Notre Dame already in September. We talked about how the new playoff format is going to take away some of these all-or-nothing regular season games. With Notre Dame having already lost to Northern Illinois at home, this is an elimination game for the Irish. They have to win the game, in my judgment, to get in the playoff, or else there will be too many marks on their resume. There aren't enough opportunities for positive. I guess you'd say USC at the end, and maybe if Florida State gets its act together, maybe that would be more positive than it appears now. I think it's a must-win, and I don't think they do it. I'm taking Louisville to go in and win the game. Now, you alluded to health, and I know Tyler Shuck is, I guess got nicked up a little bit. This will be, you have to make a pick now with what
Exactly.
I'm going to assume he plays. And, if he doesn't, then this is going to be the wrongest pick of all wrong picks, wrong picks of all time.
We're on the same page.
Yeah, but I'm taking Louisville to win the game outright. And and to really establish themselves as a threat to Miami and Clemson in the ACC as well. Really entertaining game in Happy Valley. Complete with our friend Brett, I prefer to call you Bert Bielema, talking a little under the radar junk. Illinois and Penn State, first time in Happy Valley since the 9 overtime affair in Brett's first year. And then Brett says at his press conference, they're looking for whiteout energy, quote, whatever the hell that means. Illinois feeling itself a little bit going into Happy Valley. What do you think?
This is a whiteout energy point spread. That's for sure. 17.5 is a lot. Illinois is more than a capable team. You saw that in a win against Kansas, which hasn't held up their end of the bargain, being ranked when Illinois beat them. But then Illinois goes to Lincoln, and that overtime possession was as bad a possession as I've ever seen from a team in overtime, and that had all the makings because of Illinois' defense, pressuring Raiola the way they did, put him behind the 50-yard line in overtime was just jaw-dropping when you look at what was at stake in that game and how great of a game it was going into it. I love what Altmaier's done. I love what Bielema's done in the portal and getting those 2 receivers. They are monster difference makers, and we're going to really find out. If you go back, Mr. Kotelnicki, the new offensive coordinator at Penn State, diced up this Illinois defense with Kansas's offense last year. Now it's different. You look at how he approaches things. He loves to, throw all the eye candy at a defense, but still, stick to his goods and the fundamentals of the offense. So I'm going to say Penn State wins. I will take Illinois plus that 17.5.
Right there with you. Illinois is one of 7 teams that hasn't allowed a rushing touchdown this year. They will allow at least one against Penn State. I'm really high on Penn State. I excused the Bowling Green performance. Bowling Green's probably a little bit better than people give them credit for, and they were coming off the road win against West Virginia, and they won the game. Now they don't need to have more performances like that. I still have them, right around the top 5 or 6. But I think too many points, it's too many. It feels like a 34-17 game, which would be just under the hook. But I like Penn State to win. I think Penn State's the better team. I think they'll control the game. They will be the obvious better team, and I think that Penn State will win at home, and maybe we'll have a little whiteout energy, whatever the heck that means. There's some Bloomington energy that hasn't been seen in quite some time. Indiana hosting Maryland. Kurt Signetti, Google him, just finds ways to win. What do you think between the Terps and the Hoosiers?
This is a big spot for both teams because, I thought Coach Saban brought up at the beginning of the season how top heavy is the Big Ten. When you saw those teams ranked in the top 10 and right outside it with Oregon and Ohio State and Michigan, what was the next tier going to look like? I believe both these teams are in that tier. When you look at what it was, Maryland, brutal loss at home to start the Big Ten season to Michigan State. They miss a field goal. Michigan State hits a big play. Maryland doesn't go for it. They punt it away. They never get the ball back. This is a big I believe all the money and the people, the public, all is going to be on the home team. Indiana has been very, very good to gamblers to start this season. It's sitting at 7. They're getting a ton of money, and it's not moved. Something tells me the offense of Maryland could go there and do some things. I'm going to say Indiana wins. Maryland covers the 7.
Saw this in Bill Connolly's column. On a per-drive basis, Indiana is first in points per drive and 9th in points allowed per drive. Curtis Rourke, the Ohio U transfer, has been playing great. The coaches will tell you there he's given them a tremendous veteran presence. And because I've kind of kept up with them a little closer than I might have in other times because, Indiana's off and off the radar, and you'll go and watch. But I locked in for quite some time on a couple of their games this year. And friendship with their passing game coordinator, Tino Sinceri. I just wanted to see what Tino and the fellas and Shanahan, the offensive coordinator, what they were cooking up. Man, they look crisp. They look crisp. They're not just floundering around out there. They execute well. Rourke does a really good job in managing the game and making plays, which the first job of a quarterback is to be a game manager. And he does that very well. And he's also a guy who can make plays, and he has. I don't think Indiana can win the Big Ten, so don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. But they get Nebraska, Michigan, and Washington all at home. They don't go to Ohio State until late in the season, and they don't play Penn State or Oregon. So the schedule, in addition to being crisp and good, gives them a chance to have a really special first season under Signetti. And I think it continues. I'm going to go with Indiana to win the game. It's close on the line. If you care about games of chance, I say a push to a cover sounds about right. I think Indiana, pretty good pass rush too. I'm going to say Indiana wins and wins by enough. Neutral site game, Arkansas and Texas A&M, 3:30 Eastern time on ESPN. Aggies favored by a field goal and a half. Arkansas, apparently, I've been reliably informed, if it played Auburn 9 more times, it would lose those 9 games. But as it turns out, they won the one time that they did play Auburn, and now they come in with a little confidence against A&M. What do you think?
Really love what I've seen from Arkansas. I think it's so brutal. They ended up blowing that game at Oklahoma State, or they would be on the cusp. I think they would already hit their season win total for what the prognosticators had before the season. Listen to Trent Dilfer, coach of UAB, after they played Arkansas the week after that Oklahoma State game. He said Bobby Petrino has gone all the way back to his Lamar Jackson days at Louisville with the quarterback run game with Mr. Green at quarterback now. And then you think about that and the diversity that brings to the table. It is an absolute pain in the butt for defenses to have to defend it. The way quarterback run creates another gap, it creates another blocker. So they've done a really good job scheme-wise. And on the other side, you've got a team that got humbled real quickly in their home stadium. We were there for Notre Dame. And how does Coach Elko react? What do you see from him, his bravado that he brings to the program? And they've been impressive. The quarterback change due to injury has been immensely needed and proven to be a difference for them. The matchup to me is Arkansas's pass game against A&M's secondary. A&M has plenty of talent on the defensive line. They'll be all right there. But Auburn had so many chances in the pass game last week against that. Bowling Green diced up that A&M secondary, and I believe Arkansas has the goods. I like Arkansas to win the game.
I was sitting here listening, and I was thinking, okay, Steve and I've been a little bit too lockstep here. Maybe I should think about going opposite, whatever. But I kind of like Arkansas in this game too. Marcel Reed certainly has improved Texas A&M, but I think I'm going to go with the Hogs to win a close, wild game. Somebody will probably have a ball bounce off a tuba and score. That seems to be the way it has gone when these two have met in Arlington. So I'm going to go with Arkansas. They're the underdog, and certainly that sets up a big opportunity for the Hogs against Tennessee next week, I believe. Isn't that right? They have the Vols next week.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it might be worth keeping an eye on there, especially if they're able to win. Late night on ESPN, Arizona and Utah. Now the Utes, coming off that big road win against Oklahoma State, are favored by 11. Noah Fafita, Tedarua McMillan, they kind of cut up the Utes last year. They beat them pretty good, 42-18, different coach, different set of circumstances. Still, I guess, some drama surrounding Willie or won't he with Utah quarterback and Cam Rising. What do you think in this one?
A lot of points. Utah said last week on Mr. Van Pelt's podcast, they're simply not afraid of anything. And we made a big deal going to the first game, Stillwater, fans right on top of you, didn't know if they were going to have their quarterback, and they just put a stranglehold on Oklahoma State for 60 minutes. Oklahoma State coach makes a quarterback change, just had Oklahoma State all out of whack. They're not going to be able to do that to Arizona and what Fafita brings to the table. They got humbled in a game at Kansas State, but their defense has shown improvement, and that's what I was most worried about. I believe Utah wins but Arizona covers that 11 points because of that offense, hits a couple big plays to get them going early, and Arizona's in this game the whole night long. Utah wins, Arizona covers.
I was a little bit taken aback. I know they missed a play in the first half of the game against Kansas State that could have been a touchdown,
Yep.
turned into an interception, and when it did, things kind of got sideways.
Unraveled, yeah.
But the fact that they kind of got housed the rest of the way on the road worries me a little bit. I'm going to say
Understood.
Utah wins by enough, regardless of which quarterback they play. But I would be alert for if you like to play games of chance, which I don't recommend because, of course, there are no sure things there, and you're putting hard-earned money at risk. But if you are inclined to play games of chance, maybe to buy a soda for a friend, I'd be careful of that back door swinging open.
Yeah.
In that game, just because of the prowess of the Arizona offense. Oregon and UCLA late night game. Bruins played much better against LSU than they did against Indiana. Showed some fight, but the Ducks a big favorite, a Big Ten game with an old Pac-12 feel in the Rose Bowl.
This will be the latest game, I believe, on Saturday night. I was really, really impressed with what UCLA brought to the table. You talked about that Indiana game, and they got beat from the jump, and they were never in that game. And then you talk about the idea of, plenty was made of Coach Foster and going back to the Big Ten Media Day comments. But there is still a guy that knows what he's doing with offense there with Mr. Bieniemy, and I thought you saw a plan against LSU. Now, Oregon's a better defense than LSU. I'm worried about LSU's defense going forward with what we saw at South Carolina. Now you got the injury to their best athlete on defense in Perkins. So LSU's in their own tier. But UCLA had a plan. They've shown improvement. This is a lot of points. A lot of points. Oregon's off the bye, and they got back to the norm, or I should say, they got back to what I believe people expected from then, going to Corvallis and put one on the Beavers, which had to make them feel good and help Coach Lanning about the feeling of his roster. I'm gonna say Oregon's defense is the difference, and I'm gonna lay the monster number with the Ducks here. Don't love it, but I will lay it here.
Dylan Gabriel, who's completing 84% of his passes, had some time on the bye weekend, apparently, to go out and pick pumpkins with his fiancee. That's always a good thing. Good way to relax. Much better, much more relaxing after you weren't sacked. You got sacked 7 times in the first 2 games. I think they only allowed 5 with Bo Nix at quarterback all of last season. So the offensive line being a little more settled there. I still have plenty of questions. Not about the enemy. He's obviously a proven offensive coordinator, but just about matchups. Number of guys to make those big plays. Oregon has plenty of them. I think Oregon wins and wins big. UCLA may hang for a while. This feels like a pull away mid third quarter. The back-breaking touchdown that gives you the 21-point lead, which then ends up 28. So I'm going to go with the Ducks to put it on UCLA in that game on Saturday night, which brings us to the main event, Steve. Alabama and Georgia. Last 51 times Georgia has played, they've only lost twice, both times to Alabama. They last won in that stadium, I believe, in Nick Saban's first season in overtime. Matthew Stafford throwing a touchdown pass there, but it's a rare situation when these two teams even play in the regular season. They did play in the 2020 regular season. Pretty easy Alabama victory relative to how easy it is to beat Georgia, which is not easy ever. But the Bulldogs are favored.
Yeah.
They're the number 2 team in the country. They're the team that's supposed to win it. Who wins the game?
First of all, I think the number you got is the first time Alabama's been an underdog since that same season. It was the LSU game with Bama and LSU. I believe LSU won in overtime that game. I'm not positive.
That's right. You're right.
We touched on it at the beginning. Plenty to like here. NFL talent, obviously, all across the board. The roles have shifted. Like I talked about, Georgia looked as beatable as they could or has in recent past in that road win at Kentucky. So Kirby's going to have the team's attention. Carson Beck, will he pull the trigger? And on the other side, Alabama. Now you get your home game. You get your they've the best part of Alabama has been that front seven for me, because I wasn't sure what to expect. You got some program guys that have been there a while that haven't played to the level that it was expected of them up front. And on the back end with transfers, youth, the whole thing, still got 13 back there who was awesome against Wisconsin and Malachi Moore. The crowd, the defense, Alabama wins the game.
All off season, I've thought that Georgia would win this game. And the doubt has crept into my mind, not necessarily because of the Kentucky game. I'm not worried about the Kentucky game and the way it went at all, because Georgia's done that from time to time. Teams who face an opponent who view it as their Super Bowl every week sometimes have that happen to them on the road.
Yeah, no doubt.
Looking for big playmakers has been a little more troubling. They had some flashes of it in the second half against Clemson, which is probably the closest thing you'd think from a defense of what they'll face, not schematically necessarily, but in terms of talent that they'll face on Saturday night. I think Georgia is the stronger team, top to bottom. And it's really hard for me, as much as my gut is telling me Alabama, it's kind of hard for me to get around the fact, are they really going to have a coaching transition and new schemes? And are they really going to beat them again? My gut is telling me Alabama. I'm going to go against the gut and say Georgia pulls out a close game that, say, Georgia maybe wins on a late field goal and, hands DeBoer his first loss, but that Georgia will exhale and feel like, okay, we've gotten past this albatross, at least for now, and they find it again later this season.
Oh, yeah.
And that Alabama is going to come out of it disappointed but encouraged.
Verified.
Because I think that there's a sense of, okay, is the transition really going to go this smoothly? And I think Alabama will play so well on Saturday night that all of those concerns will be alleviated, and both teams will be looking very much the part of playoff teams. I will go with Georgia going on the road and getting a massive victory, and as a result, reclaiming its spot as number one team in the polls by Monday morning.
One thing I'm really interested here, Rece, fourth downs. I'm really interested to see. This has always been, a traditional battle. Those fourth and shorts or fourth and manageable. What do we do here? Because that's one thing I believe momentum's a huge thing. You talk about the energy in this stadium and the energy these two teams provide, both head coaches. Fourth downs to keep your defense possibly off the field. I'm really interested to see if any of that changes. Coach DeBoer, you talked about it, coming in a new, different mindset. What happens in those situations? I'm really, really interested to see what happens.
I know the dialects are different from the Pacific Northwest to the South.
Yeah.
But if I could borrow from my heritage, the one thing Alabama fans will find out about Kalen DeBoer, he ain't scared.
No. I know. That's what I'm saying.
With potentially spotting the playoff on the line against an arch rival, Washington State, he runs an option play in which one of the options is a reverse to Roma Dunze on 4th and 1 from his own 29 inside 2 minutes in a tie game against arch rival Washington State. It worked. They won, went on to the national championship game. DeBoer will not be overwhelmed by this. First, because of his demeanor. Second, because he's coached in big games and his team will be ready to play. They easily could win the game. I'm picking Georgia, but I think Alabama fans will be not that they're really anxious. I think they've been impressed up to this point, but I think they'll be heartened by the guy that they have assuming command after the reign of Nick Saban. So it's going to be really fun. It's going to be great theater, intense atmosphere. Can't wait to get down there, and not only for College Game Day in the morning, but our pregame show on ABC, halftime show, and to see how things go on the board. How'd you do on the board last week on game day? Did you do well?
3-0.
Oh, 3-0. Huh? Is that the first 3-0 week or not?
It is. It is.
Of the season or of the year and a half tenure here?
Oh, of all time.
Really?
we made history last week.
Oh, we're going to be celebrating that.
It was a good one. We had that, and we had the Superdog on the field.
Oh yeah.
So,
oh man,
we had a good week.
It was. I was so nervous with the Superdog because look, you and I would talk about this. We want to help the show shine a light on another game. We want to be right. Everybody wants to be right. You want to win. Seeing that 0, I was the last one to score. And so, Memphis Navy, I've got Navy. I'm up 19 in the fourth quarter. All of a sudden it gets down to 5. Then they get the onside kick. I'm like, 5 is going to feel like a loss here. And then I started having these terrible visions of not only losing the game, but then Navy desperately trying to win, throwing a pick six and losing the cover. Instead, the good men of the United States Naval Academy got a pick six, and I got on the board. I've already told this story this week, but look, I endured a lot of abuse the first few weeks of the season. My Superdog.
Just from one person. Just from one person.
Well, that's true. That's true. Herb Street. But my Superdogs prior to this, I mean, I had one down 52-0 before halftime. I wasn't getting 53. I was getting like 10. So anyway, it's fun. And hopefully we can shine the light on some other games in addition to the magnitude of the gargantuan tilt in Tuscaloosa.
One other thing, Rece says, as we continue to chase Coach Corso atop the Superdog standings, I'm at a tailgate.
How great is that, by the way? Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Waiting for Michigan. We're watching Michigan USC, and I had said I believe Oklahoma people have more disdain for Lincoln Riley and USC than they love their Sooners nowadays because of the angst and everything built up. So we're out at the tailgate waiting to go in, but that game's going on. And they're rooting like heck for Michigan, and Michigan scores. They win the game. Place is going crazy, and we're walking in, and I just said I said, I'll be damned. Coach Corso did it again. Another win on the field, and man, he's making it hard. He's put a lot of pressure on the young bucks on the desk. That's for sure.
It is awesome.
Fun as hell. Fun as hell.
But I see you've learned from him because when I mentioned your record last week, you're very low key because, like LC always says.
Yep.
When you lose, say little. When you win,
say less.
Yep. I haven't learned that lesson yet, but I have so little experience with winning on these picks that I haven't learned that lesson. Perhaps I will be able to. Thanks for listening to the College Game Day podcast. We encourage you to subscribe or download wherever you prefer to get your podcast.